I have a question based on the culture, right? Like when the gaming industry first started, it wasn't as big. And maybe like the older generations didn't get to see it as to be lucrative as it is. You're in the gaming industry, you're engineering, right? You're engineering the game. You're engineering how the design goes through and the codes, right? So that's a form of math in a sense, like high class math, high skills math. Sorry. Um, so with that, like let's I guess I want to bring it back to like the Asian culture with parents. Did they see the sight of the gaming industry being where it's at right now? Like, did they see the vision of you traveling around the world? Because that's lucrative in itself. Like, yes, you got to travel, even though you can't really see the sightseeing as you go around. But it's still like a fun little thing, something like that that's a little different than the corporate world. It gets you around the world to see different perspectives, cultures, and experiences. So, what's your thoughts on the older generation not seeing the lucrative and the high skills in the gaming industry, and how would you translate that to, let's say, there's a kid out there that wants to get in the gaming industry, but the parents don't see how it could really impact, and that games can be a good thing for society. Like not all games, but some games actually help with the development and with skills. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think my parents, at least just speaking from my perspective, I think they were happy that I went away from the retail, even though my mom, after like 10 years, like, I still don't understand what you do. Because at some point they thought I was calling random people like, hey, do you want to buy my game? And I'm like, that's not what I do. Like, why would you think that I'm just calling, people from like a book and be like, do you want to buy this game? So she doesn't understand, but she's happy because like, oh, you get to travel the world, you seem to earn a decent amount of money. So there's nothing for them to complain on.
Yeah.
If there's nothing to complain on, then you're doing well, because my parents love to complain about everything. But I think it's very similar to, the older generation when the TV came out and people were like, oh, how can you be staring at the TV? You're going to go blind. You can't sit, too close to the TV. And, like how people were afraid of like certain types of music that it's, related to the Satan or the devil, and then people were, seeing that as a bad thing. I think in every generation you're gonna have an older generation that doesn't understand, either because they don't want to take the time to understand. But I do think that now that millennials are becoming parents, I think they have a better understanding because they grew up with technology, which I think, my parents didn't really do that until they were much older, and then for them might be harder to see that everything is online, and then they have a harder time understanding even, how to pay my bills online. Why do I need to log in? What's my password? All these kind of things, right? So I think it's going to become easier now that, the next generation is going to grow up. They're going to have, children, and they already know like how things work. I think it's going to become easier as time goes, I would say. So I just think that they're going to learn to understand. I think it's just one of these things that, the older generation just think all games are just, they're not good for you. You're just playing around, you're just wasting your time. But it's like I said, it's much more than that.
Yeah, they call you lazy back in the days when you were playing too much video. You're being lazy. What are you gonna gain from that? But I do think that games did explore what you couldn't financially. Like, for example, a game will take you to an adventure that you probably always had in your imagination, but you couldn't afford going to. Give you a good example. Like, this is probably Fang's favorite game, like mine's, Mass Effect, that took you to a journey of being this integral leader trying to save a galaxy. Like, how can you do that if you have very little resources, right? The game was an escapade for that kind of adventure. And but again, like I said, some parents, I don't think a lot of Latin parents were very supportive of playing these things because they saw it as a waste of time. You should read a book. But it was an entertainment. It was a story. There was something behind that make you connected with the game. And I wanted to ask you that, how how you you believe that games have connected with you, and how has that like evolved some of your thought process, right?
I mean, it's we're gonna probably come into some of my favorite games naturally. To me, like the analogy that I made with books, I used to love reading books, and to me, it was just that you would have an image of whatever was happening in the book in your head, and the only difference is that I'm engaging more actively by playing a game that I'm controlling, and maybe I'm playing games that I would never have foresee the story or the way it impacted me, or so very different to see something and to read something, right? So sometimes, when we try to figure out how do I solve this problem and someone explains to you on the whiteboard and you see, everything, someone like some people just visually just like learn by seeing visuals. So some people like to read and do things. So to me, I just found that it was, for example, one of the games that are my favorite is called Journey. It came like 2013. It's a short game, but it goes through the whole phase of life and everything. And then initially when you look at it, it's like, oh, what is this? You're just walking around in a desert. Like, what is the point of this game? But not until you played it, you realize that, no one is ever speaking. There's no text, there's nothing. It's just the music and the things you're going through while you're playing it. So to me, it's just, a very clever use of the medium where, you don't necessarily have to talk or, read. You just have to feel it. And that's something I think books and, TV to a certain extent cannot do.